Zabel Yessayan was on the list of 250 Armenian writers, intellectuals, leaders in the community targeted for arrest and murder on April 24th, 1915. Zabel was considered a threat to the government, primarily, I believe, because she had written In the Ruins. And that was a book that talked about the Armenian soul and the ability of the Armenians to fight back and to struggle for their ideals and their beliefs. The Turkish police came to her house on the night of April 24th to arrest her. And she wasn't at home. She was at a friend's house, and her mother was there. And as soon as she could, her mother got word to Zabel that they were looking for her. So immediately, Zabel and her friend went into hiding because they were looking for him as well. And they went from house to house to people, first to homes of people they knew, but they were in their own neighborhood. So then they had to escape to a different neighborhood where they would be less visible, less likely to be, recognized. Then she knew that there was someone who was a distant relative who worked in a hospital, and she went to the hospital and she basically pretended to be ill. In fact, she probably was very ill, given the situation that she knew many of her friends had been imprisoned. She didn't know what the fate of all these friends were, these writers. She was worried about her mother. She was worried about her son, who was living with her mother. So she was in this hospital, and this distant relative helped to keep her identity hidden. And after a period of time, she was able to escape from Constantinople into Bulgaria. And she did it using a false identity. And in Bulgaria, she immediately started working on behalf of her colleagues who were in prison. She worked with diplomats in Bulgaria, foreign diplomats. She also wrote articles to the press. She was fluent in French, so she was writing articles in French about what was happening to the Armenian people, particularly in Constantinople. At this point, she didn't know what was happening in the provinces. She would unfortunately find out, because then she had to escape Bulgaria when they entered the war on the side of the Germans and the Turks. She escaped to the Caucasus, first to Tiflis and then to Baku, where she took down eyewitness testimony of the genocide in order to get the word out to the world about what was happening to Armenia. She also published several articles in Baku newspapers, and a lot of them dealt with the treatment of women in the genocide. And so Zabel Yessayan wrote a letter to Boghos Nubar Pasha and the Armenian delegation in Paris in 1919, specifically about the treatment of women during the genocide and about the enslavement of women and children in Muslim households. And she came to the delegation and spoke about it as well. She also went back to Adana to help again with the orphanages in the early 1920s. And there again, she met with many female victims, survivors of the genocide, who told her about their experiences, particularly rape. She wrote about the fact that women had been enslaved in Muslim households. And she also wrote about the fact that when they had children, through this enforced enslavement, these children were forced to become Muslim because the fathers were Muslim. The women basically lost their identity. And this is something that we now recognize today as one of the tools of genocide used by the perpetrators of genocide to basically shame and humiliate the population, specifically the women, and also to absorb the women into their own majority population, because once a woman has a child from the perpetrators of genocide, the child no longer belongs to the minority group. So this is something that she wrote about early on, at a time when nobody else was talking about specifically what happened to women and how it was different from the experience of men during the genocide. And so again, another example about how Zabel Yessayan was really way ahead of her time. Her strong stance on social justice and human rights, which comes out in her writing, but also came out in her voice when she spoke on behalf of women at the Paris delegation. She was always speaking out on behalf of human rights. Zabel Yessayan said that literature is a weapon to struggle against injustice. And I believe that she lived that. She lived it through her voice, through her person, and through her writing.